Hello students, today I am going to explain you the second chapter of Supplementary Reader. The name of the chapter is The Address by Marconi. About the author, Marconi, who was born in 1920, grew up in a Jewish family of 5 children in Breda. Unlike her sisters, brothers and parents, she escaped being arrested and went into hiding during World War II. She made her literary debut in 1957 with Bitter Herbs. The laconic and devastating story of a young girl who escapes through a back door when her family is arrested and ultimately discovers that she has lost everyone close to her. The book was a great success at home and abroad, with over 400,000 copies sold in the Netherlands alone. The jury praised her as the author of a modest and intensely powerful body of work. So students, one of the writings of Marconi is being included in the syllabus. Chapter sketch. This story is a touching account of a girl who goes in search of her mother's belongings after the Second World War in Holland. But even after finding what she so much wanted to touch, to see, to feel and remember, she leaves everything behind, as it could not bring her dead mother back. She decides to move on and live with only memories of the former times, the memories related of her mother. The address that held so much importance till she visited place lost its value, and the girl realized that it could get her nothing but pain. Before starting the explanation, you must know about the characters. The first important character of the story is the daughter. She is the narrator herself, who returns to Holland to go to the address where her mother's precious belongings were kept. As normalcy had returned after the Second World War in Holland, she wanted to see all possessions that were a bond between her family and herself. The second important character is Mrs. S. The narrator's mother in the story has been called as Mrs. S. She was a simpleton who could not see the manipulating. Manipulating student means control something or someone to your advantage. And fraudulent means dishonest nature of Mrs. Dorling. Who was Mrs. Dorling? She was her acquaintance, means a known person. She trusted Mrs. Dorling and allowed her to keep all her precious belongings for the time being. The third important character is Mrs. Dorling. She has been described as an old acquaintance of Mrs. S. After a long gap, she appeared again during the war. She possessed a cunning personality. She is most reluctant, you can say unwilling, to recognize the daughter and does not allow her to enter the house. Here is the vocabulary list for you students, so it can help you out when you will read the chapter thoroughly. Yes students, now let's start the summary of the chapter. Mrs. Dorling's indifferent attitude towards the narrator. What happens? Once the narrator knocked at the door of a house, but the door was opened only a little, not widely. She asked the owner if she knew her. The narrator told her that she was Mrs. S. daughter. But the owner of the house Who was she? She was Mrs. Dorling. Denied. She said no. Knowing her, though she recognized the girl, but what she said that I didn't recognize. Mrs. Dorling's face gave absolutely no sign of recognition, and she kept staring at her without speaking any word. The narrator thought that perhaps she was mistaken. Seeing the expressions of the lady, Mrs. Dorling, the narrator herself thought that it is possible that she might have come to a wrong address and had rung the wrong bell. Then the narrator got a glimpse meaning a sudden look, of her mother's green knitted cardigan, the sweater she was wearing. A sweater with buttons is called as a cardigan, which Mrs. Dorling was wearing. And that made the girl confident and sure that she has come to the correct address. This confirmed to her that she had reached the correct address. But Mrs. Dorling excused herself by saying that she could not talk to the girl that day and she should come again later. Then she shamelessly closed the door. Someone watching the narrator from the window. The narrator stood for some time on the steps, even after the door closed, because she was having a hope that the lady will once again open the door and she will welcome her to the room. But what she saw? Someone was watching her from the bay window. The girl presumed that someone other than Mrs. Dorling must be watching her and must have asked why the narrator came there. Finally, the narrator remembers what her mother had told her. After this refusal, the narrator walked back to the station, thinking about her mother. Her mother had given her Mrs. Dorling's address years ago. It had been in the first half of the war. The narrator's mother told her about Mrs. Dorling, an old acquaintance, a known person. She also informed her that every time when Mrs. Dorling came, she took something home with her. The reason Mrs. Dorling gave for her actions was that she wanted to save all the good things, as the narrator's mother would not be able to save everything if they had to leave suddenly. The narrator's mother had accepted the idea. She was rather obliged towards Mrs. Dorling that she was carrying such heavy luggage every time she visited, as it was really risky during the war. Students, for better understanding of this chapter, I have divided this chapter into two parts. This was the explanation for the first part for the chapter, The Address by Marconi. The next part of the chapter will be explained in the next PPT. So students, I hope you have understood, and please, you are requested again and again to do thorough reading of the chapter. Thank you students, and have a nice day.